I am Maxine Howard, 32 years old, and a cybersecurity specialist at TechDynamics. My career has been built on protecting data and maintaining digital fortresses. I never thought my ethical standards would collide so violently with corporate politics until the CEO's nephew decided I was in his way. What started as a technical disagreement spiraled into a multi-million-dollar catastrophe that nobody saw coming except me. Before I dive into how I brought down a corporate tyrant, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up to workplace bullies. 6 years ago, I landed what I considered my dream job at TechDynamics, a company that was making waves in the tech industry with innovative software solutions for healthcare providers. With my master's in cybersecurity from MIT and 4 years of experience at a smaller firm, I was ready to make an impact at a company that seemed to value both innovation and integrity. When I first joined, TechDynamics had a vibrant culture focused on merit and expertise. Our CEO, Robert Phillips, had built the company from nothing into a respected name in health tech. The company was known for its rigorous security standards, which was crucial given that we handled sensitive medical data. That commitment to security was what attracted me in the first place. My role as lead security architect gave me oversight of all our security protocols and infrastructure. I led a team of 12 security specialists, each brilliant in their own right. We worked tirelessly to ensure that every piece of data flowing through our systems was protected against increasingly sophisticated threats. I took pride in knowing that our work protected not just the company but the private medical information of millions of patients. The problems began about 2 years ago, when Robert Phillips brought his nephew Jeremy into the company. Jeremy had a business degree from a mid-tier college and virtually no technical experience, yet he was immediately hired as a strategic consultant. The eye rolls among the technical staff were almost audible, but we figured it was just a case of harmless nepotism. Many companies have their share of do-nothing relatives on the payroll. We were wrong. Jeremy was 30, ambitious, and had an inflated sense of his own capabilities. Unlike most nepotism hires who are content to collect a paycheck for minimal work, Jeremy wanted power and recognition. He began inserting himself into meetings where he had no expertise, offering suggestions that showed his complete lack of understanding of our technical infrastructure. My direct supervisor, Amanda Torres, was a seasoned IT director who initially tried to shield our department from Jeremy's interference. Just humor him in meetings, she would tell us, but do what needs to be done properly. Amanda had been with the company for 11 years and had earned Robert's trust, so she felt secure enough to gently push back when necessary. Another key figure in this story is Derek Morgan, our CFO. Derek was always skeptical of security expenses, viewing them as necessary evils rather than investments. "I know we need security," he would say during budget meetings, "but does it have to cost so much?" Despite his penny-pinching tendencies, Derek was meticulous about financial compliance and risk management. My closest ally was Sarah Jenkins, a senior security analyst who had joined TechDynamics just a month after me. Sarah was brilliant with threat detection systems and had an uncanny ability to spot anomalies in network traffic. More importantly, she was uncompromising when it came to security standards. We became friends outside of work, often meeting for coffee to discuss the latest in cybersecurity trends or just to vent about workplace frustrations. Everything changed when TechDynamics began developing a revolutionary patient data management system called HealthFlow. This system promised to integrate with hospital networks across the country, providing seamless access to patient records while maintaining strict HIPAA compliance. The potential market was enormous, and investors were taking notice. With HealthFlow on the horizon, TechDynamics secured a comprehensive cybersecurity insurance policy worth $199 million. This policy was not just a safety net, it was a selling point for investors and potential clients. It demonstrated our commitment to security and provided financial protection in case of a breach. The policy had strict requirements, though. We had to maintain specific security protocols at all times, including proper access controls, regular security audits, encrypted data transmission, and robust authentication systems. My team and I designed these protocols, and I personally certified our compliance each quarter. Then came the announcement that stunned the entire tech department. Jeremy Phillips was being promoted to Vice President of Operations, a position that would give him authority over multiple departments, including partial oversight of IT infrastructure. The announcement came during a company-wide meeting, and I still remember the look of shock on Amanda's face. She had not been consulted about this decision that would directly impact her department. This strategic move will help streamline our operations as we prepare for the HealthFlow launch, Robert announced proudly, his hand on his nephew's shoulder. Jeremy stood there with a smug smile, making eye contact with me specifically. We had butted heads in several meetings by that point, and it was clear he saw me as an obstacle. After the meeting, Sarah whispered to me, "This is going to be a disaster. He knows nothing about operations, let alone security." I nodded but tried to remain optimistic. Maybe he will stick to the business side and leave the technical decisions to us. How wrong I was. The disaster was just beginning, and it would be far worse than any of us could have imagined. Within 2 weeks of Jeremy's promotion, he called a meeting to review all IT processes. The official reason was to streamline operations before the HealthFlow launch, but his actual agenda became clear almost immediately. "I have been looking at our security protocols," Jeremy announced to the room, pulling up a PowerPoint presentation with graphics that drastically oversimplified our complex security infrastructure. "And I believe we have redundancies that are slowing down development and adding unnecessary costs." I felt my stomach tighten as he clicked to a slide titled Unnecessary Security Protocols. At the top of his list was our VPN infrastructure for remote work. "Our developers and team members complain that the VPN connections slow down their work," Jeremy continued, "and maintaining this system costs us over $300,000 annually." "The VPN is not optional," I interjected, keeping my voice professional, despite my rising frustration. "It is a critical component that ensures all remote connections to our network are encrypted and secure. It is also explicitly required by our insurance policy." Jeremy's expression hardened. "Insurance policies can be renegotiated, Maxine. What cannot be negotiated is our timeline for HealthFlow. Every day of delay costs us market share." Robert, who rarely attended these technical meetings, had chosen to sit in on this one. He nodded along with his nephew's presentation. "Jeremy raises some good points. We need to be thinking about efficiency." After the meeting, I immediately drafted a detailed email explaining why each of the security measures Jeremy had questioned was essential, with specific references to regulatory requirements and our insurance policy stipulations. I sent it to Robert, Jeremy, Amanda, and Derek, hoping that laying out the facts would settle the matter. No one acknowledged my email. 3 days later, I caught Jeremy telling a group of developers that they could use a commercial VPN service instead of our corporate one if it makes things easier for you. This was a direct violation of our security policies, as commercial VPN services did not provide the audit logs and specific security features our corporate solution offered. I confronted him after the developers left. "Jeremy, you cannot tell the team to use commercial VPNs. It violates our security policies and potentially exposes protected health information." "I am just trying to help the team work more efficiently," he replied dismissively. "Your security policies are getting in the way of actual work." "These policies exist for a reason," I insisted. "We handle sensitive medical data. One breach could destroy patient trust, not to mention expose us to massive liability." Jeremy stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, Maxine. Things are changing around here. You can either adapt or get left behind." I reported this conversation to Amanda, who looked increasingly worried. "I will talk to Robert," she promised. "But tread carefully, Maxine. Jeremy has Robert's ear now." The next confrontation came during the quarterly security update. My team had identified several vulnerabilities that needed addressing before the HealthFlow launch. The fixes would take time and resources, but they were non-negotiable from a security standpoint. Jeremy interrupted my presentation, repeatedly questioning the necessity of each fix and suggesting workarounds that would completely undermine our security posture. When I explained that these fixes were necessary for maintaining our insurance compliance, he scoffed. "We need to focus on launching HealthFlow on schedule," he insisted. "These security fixes can wait until after we have secured the next round of funding." Surprisingly, Derek, the CFO, backed me up. "The insurance policy is non-negotiable," he stated firmly. "If we fail to maintain the required security standards, we could void the entire $199 million policy. That is a financial risk I am not willing to take." With Derek's support, I won that particular battle. The security updates were approved, and I felt a momentary sense of relief. But Jeremy's expression as he left the meeting told me this was far from over. That evening, while checking system logs, I noticed something concerning. There had been multiple failed login attempts to administrator accounts from unusual IP addresses. After digging deeper, I found evidence that someone had been attempting to modify our firewall rules, though the changes had not been successfully implemented. I documented everything and showed the logs to Sarah the next morning. "This is not random," she said after reviewing the data. "Someone is specifically targeting admin access. And look at the timestamps these attempts occurred right after working hours." "Could it be an inside job?" I asked, voicing the suspicion that had been growing in my mind. Sarah nodded grimly. "It is definitely someone with knowledge of our systems. The question is, what are they trying to accomplish?" I began keeping detailed records of all security-related incidents, saving them both on secure company servers and encrypted on my personal devices as backup. Something told me I would need this documentation later. Amanda called me into her office later that week. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes. "Robert asked me about reducing some of our security protocols," she admitted. "He specifically mentioned the VPN infrastructure." "You told him that is non-negotiable, right?" I asked, alarmed. Amanda sighed. "I tried, Maxine, but he kept talking about how Jeremy has found more cost-effective solutions. I think they have already made up their minds." "But the insurance policy," I protested. "I know," she said. I reminded him of that. He said they are in discussions with the insurance provider about modernizing the requirements. That night I found evidence in the logs that someone had granted elevated privileges to Jeremy's account, privileges he should never have had. With these access levels, he could potentially bypass many of our security controls. The situation was deteriorating faster than I had anticipated. The security of our entire system, and with it the private medical data of millions of patients, was at risk. And it seemed like no one with the power to stop it was willing to listen. The announcement came on a Monday morning all-hands meeting. Robert stood proudly at the podium, Jeremy at his side like a crown prince. "I am thrilled to announce that we have secured a conditional commitment for $199 million in new funding for HealthFlow," Robert announced to applause. "The investor group, led by Maxwell Investments, is extremely excited about our potential to revolutionize healthcare data management." The applause faded as Robert continued. "To finalize this investment, we will be hosting Maxwell's team for a comprehensive review in 3 weeks. They want to see our progress, infrastructure, and security protocols firsthand." My heart raced. A security audit by sophisticated investors could expose the corners Jeremy had been cutting. "I expect everyone to ensure their departments are running flawlessly," Robert continued. "This is our chance to secure TechDynamics' future. Jeremy will be coordinating all preparations for this visit." After the meeting, Jeremy wasted no time. He called an emergency session with the IT leadership team, including Amanda, myself, and the heads of development and infrastructure. "We need to streamline everything before the investor visit," Jeremy declared. "No hiccups, no delays, no excuses about security protocols slowing things down. I want the demo environment running at maximum speed with zero friction." "The investors will also be evaluating our security," I pointed out. "Maxwell Investments is known for their thorough due diligence, especially regarding data protection." Jeremy waved his hand dismissively. "They care about functionality and market potential. The security details are just checkboxes to them. Those checkboxes are what protect our users' data and maintain our insurance coverage." I countered, feeling my professional patience wearing thin. "Speaking of which," Jeremy said, sliding a document across the table to me, "I need admin privileges to the security control panel for the demo environment. Sign off on this." I read the request and looked up in disbelief. "This would give you unrestricted access to modify security settings. That violates our segregation of duties policy and would breach our insurance requirements." Jeremy's face darkened. "The investors are coming in 3 weeks, Maxine. I do not have time to file tickets and wait for your team to make every little change." "These are not little changes," I insisted. "You are asking for the ability to bypass our entire security infrastructure." The room grew tense as everyone sensed the power struggle unfolding. Amanda tried to mediate. Perhaps we can create a special role with limited privileges for the demo environment only. Not good enough. Jeremy snapped. I need full access. Robert has authorized this. Then Robert can sign this form and take responsibility for violating our security policies, I replied, pushing the paper back toward Jeremy. Jeremy stood up, his face red with anger. This is exactly the kind of obstruction that is holding this company back. I am trying to secure our future, and you are worried about checking boxes on some form. I am worried about protecting patient data and maintaining the insurance policy that shields this company from financial ruin. If there is a breach, I shot back, also standing now. I don't care, kill HER VPN. Jeremy shouted, pointing at me while looking at the infrastructure team lead. Disable whatever security measures are slowing us down. That is a direct order from operations. The room fell silent. Several people looked down uncomfortably. Amanda appeared shocked at the outburst. Jeremy, she began carefully, we cannot just disable security protocols. There are regulatory requirements, not to mention our insurance policy. Jeremy pulled out his phone and dialed. Uncle Robert, yes, I am in the meeting now. Maxine is refusing to provide the access we discussed. Yes, she is here. He held out the phone. He wants to speak with you. With everyone watching, I took the phone. Robert's voice was calm, but cold. Maxine, I understand your concerns for security, but we need to be flexible right now. Jeremy needs that access to prepare for the investors. Make it work. Sir, with all due respect, what he is asking for would violate our security policies and potentially void our insurance coverage, I explained. I will handle the insurance questions, Robert replied dismissively. Your job is to support this company's growth. Are you going to do that, or do we need to find someone who will? The threat was clear. I felt a knot in my stomach as I realized I was being asked to choose between my professional ethics and my job security. After a moment of tense silence, I handed the phone back to Jeremy without agreeing. I will document this request and the potential security implications, I said firmly. If you and Robert want to proceed, you will need to sign off acknowledging the risks and policy violations. Jeremy smirked as he ended the call. Draw up whatever paperwork makes you feel better, Maxine. But this is happening with or without your cooperation. That afternoon, I documented everything in detailed emails to Robert Derrick and the company's legal counsel, explicitly outlining the security risks and potential insurance violations. I received only one reply from Derrick, looking into the insurance implications. Stay the course for now. But the next day, I discovered that Jeremy had gone directly to a junior member of the IT team, Scott Turner, and pressured him into granting the access. Scott, afraid for his job, had complied without following proper protocols. When I confronted Scott, he looked miserable. He said it came directly from Robert and that my job depended on it. I have a baby on the way, Maxine. I cannot afford to get fired. I could not blame Scott. Jeremy had deliberately targeted the most vulnerable team member. I advised Scott to document everything and forwarded his account to my growing file of security violations. That night, I made an encrypted backup of all my documentation and sent it to my personal email. I was starting to fear that my access could be revoked if I continued to resist. The next day, I noticed the first signs of unusual activity in our system logs. Someone had accessed the VPN configuration files and modified settings to allow connections without proper authentication logs. This was a serious breach of our security protocols, effectively creating a backdoor into our systems. I immediately alerted Amanda and sent urgent emails to Robert and Derrick with the evidence. Amanda called an emergency meeting, but Jeremy and Robert both claimed to be too busy preparing for the investors. Derrick, however, looked increasingly concerned when I showed him the logs. This could definitely impact our insurance, he admitted. I will speak with Robert directly. But nothing changed. Instead, I found myself suddenly excluded from key meetings about the investor visit. Jeremy had effectively sidelined me, telling others that I was too focused on hypothetical security risks and not aligned with the company's growth priorities. Sarah continued to be my eyes and ears, reporting back from meetings I was not invited to. They are completely focused on making HealthFlow look good for the demo, she told me. Security is an afterthought. As the investor visit drew closer, I watched helplessly as more security controls were bypassed or disabled in the name of streamlining the demo environment. Each change was another violation of our insurance policy requirements, another potential entry point for attackers. And in the system logs, I continued to see evidence of unusual access patterns late at night. Someone was exploring our network, accessing patient data test environments and probing our most sensitive systems. The breach had already begun, and nobody would listen. 2 nights before the investor visit, I was working late, running a security scan that Jeremy had tried to cancel. The results made my blood run cold. There was clear evidence of unauthorized access through the compromised VPN connection precisely through the backdoor that had been created. I dug deeper, tracing the intrusion through our systems. The attacker had been methodical, gradually expanding their access over several days. They had extracted test patient records, financial documents, and intellectual property related to HealthFlow. Even more alarming, they had planted persistent access tools that would allow them to return at will. This was not just a security incident. It was a full-blown data breach, the very scenario our insurance policy was designed to protect against. Except that we had systematically violated the policy's security requirements, potentially voiding our coverage. I spent hours documenting everything, capturing logs, tracking the intrusion path, and compiling irrefutable evidence of the breach. By 3 a.m, I had prepared a comprehensive report with technical details that even non-technical executives could understand. At 7 a.m, I was waiting outside Robert's office with my laptop and printouts of my findings. When he arrived, he looked annoyed to see me. "This cannot wait," I said before he could speak. "We have an active security breach. Someone has accessed our systems through the compromised VPN and exfiltrated sensitive data." Robert's expression changed from annoyance to concern as he ushered me into his office. I walked him through the evidence, showing the clear connection between the security changes Jeremy had forced through and the breach. "How bad is it?" he asked when I finished. "Bad," I replied honestly. "They accessed test patient records, financial documents, and HealthFlow specifications, and they have established persistent access that we need to address immediately." Robert was silent for a moment, then reached for his phone. "Jeremy needs to hear this." 15 minutes later, Jeremy stormed into the office, coffee in hand. "This better be important. I have the final investor presentation in 2 hours." I repeated my findings, showing the same evidence. Jeremy's reaction was completely different from his uncle's. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "You are seeing ghosts because you are angry about being overruled on the security protocols. These are probably just logs from the development team working late." "I have verified these are external IP addresses," I countered. "And the data extraction patterns are consistent with known attack methodologies. This is not internal activity." "So what if someone poked around a bit?" Jeremy said dismissively. "They only accessed test environments. Nothing critical was compromised." "Test environments with actual patient data," I emphasized. "This is a reportable breach under HIPAA, and the attackers have established backdoors that could give them access to production systems." Robert looked troubled. "What do you suggest we do, Maxine?" Before I could answer, Jeremy interjected. "We cannot afford any disruptions right now. The investors will be here tomorrow. If we start raising alarms about security breaches, they will walk away. If we do not address this immediately, there may not be a company left for them to invest in," I argued. "And we are legally obligated to report this breach." "Based on your interpretation," Jeremy shot back, "I think you are exaggerating the severity to prove a point." Robert rubbed his temples. "Jeremy is right about one thing. We cannot afford to panic the investors right now. Maxine, continue investigating, but keep this quiet until after the investor meeting." "That is an order." "Sir, we need to at least inform the insurance company," I pleaded. "If they discover we knew about a breach and did not report it, they will definitely void the policy." "I said keep it quiet," Robert repeated firmly. "That includes the insurance company. We will address this after we secure the investment." I left the meeting feeling physically ill. Not only were we failing to address an active security breach, but we were also now deliberately concealing it from our insurance provider and investors. I was being asked to participate in what amounted to fraud. Back at my desk, I confided in Sarah, showing her my findings. Her face grew pale as she reviewed the evidence. This is unquestionably a breach, she confirmed. And it is still active. They accessed the system again last night. Robert and Jeremy want to hide it until after the investor meeting, I told her. Sarah looked shocked. That is illegal. Not to mention incredibly dangerous. The attackers could be planning something bigger. I know, I said quietly, but they have made their decision. Sarah squeezed my arm. What are you going to do? It was the question I had been wrestling with all morning. My career, my professional reputation, and my livelihood were all at stake. But so was my integrity, not to mention the security of millions of patients' data. I cannot be part of this cover-up, I said finally. That evening, from my home computer using a secure connection that could not be traced back to me, I submitted an anonymous tip to CyberShield, our insurance provider. I included enough technical details to be credible, but not enough to identify myself as the source. I also sent a similar tip to the regulatory authorities responsible for HIPAA enforcement. The next morning, the day of the investor visit, I arrived early to find the office buzzing with last-minute preparations. Jeremy was directing staff like a movie producer, positioning everything for maximum impact. Robert was reviewing his presentation with the executive team. No one was paying attention to security. I checked the logs again and found the attackers had returned overnight, this time penetrating even deeper into our systems. They now had access to production databases. We were well beyond a minor security incident. This was now a catastrophic breach. I made one final attempt approaching Derek with the updated information. As CFO, he at least understood the financial implications. They accessed production data last night, I told him urgently. This is now a major breach that will require disclosure. Derek reviewed my evidence with growing alarm. Have you told Robert? I tried yesterday. He and Jeremy want to wait until after the investor meeting. Derek shook his head. That is a huge mistake. If the investors find out later that we knew about this and did not disclose it, they could sue for fraud. Not to mention the insurance policy will be worthless if we deliberately concealed a breach, I added. Let me talk to Robert, Derek offered. Maybe he will listen to the financial argument. But there was no time. The investors had arrived and everyone was being called to the main conference room for the presentation. Whatever Derek might have said to Robert, it was too late now. The meeting was beginning and I had been instructed to attend but not speak unless directly addressed. As I took my seat at the back of the room, I wondered if anyone else noticed how pale I looked. I felt like I was about to witness a train wreck in slow motion, and I was powerless to stop it. The main conference room had been transformed for the investor presentation. New furniture had been brought in, decorative plants placed strategically around the room, and a large screen displayed the TechDynamics logo with sophisticated animation. Jeremy had clearly spared no expense to create the perfect impression. Maxwell Investments had sent a delegation of 5 people led by their founder, Richard Maxwell himself, a legendary figure in tech investing. Alongside him were 2 technical analysts, a financial advisor and a stern-looking woman, introduced only as Miss Lowell, our compliance specialist. Robert began with a polished overview of TechDynamics' history and vision before smoothly transitioning to Jeremy for the health flow presentation. Jeremy was in his element, charismatic and confident as he walked through the product features and market potential. The investors seemed impressed, nodding and taking notes. HealthFlow will revolutionize how medical data is shared and accessed, Jeremy declared, and we have spared no expense in ensuring it is both user-friendly and secure. I bit my tongue at that last claim, thinking of the security protocols that had been bypassed or disabled. Our security team has implemented state-of-the-art protection for patient data. Jeremy continued, gesturing vaguely in my direction, including advanced encryption, secure access controls, and comprehensive audit capabilities. Richard Maxwell spoke up for the first time. That is good to hear. Healthcare data security is not just a technical requirement. It is a matter of trust. One breach could destroy your entire business model. Absolutely, Jeremy agreed smoothly. Security is our top priority. I felt physically ill listening to these blatant lies. Just then, an unfamiliar face appeared in the doorway. A man in a crisp suit asked, "Is this the TechDynamics investor meeting?" Robert looked confused, but nodded. The man entered and introduced himself. Martin Chen, Senior Security Auditor with CyberShield Insurance. I apologize for the interruption, but we received information that required immediate attention. The room fell silent. Jeremy's smile froze on his face. Robert stood up quickly. Mr. Chen, we were not expecting you. Perhaps we could schedule a separate meeting after our investor presentation. I am afraid this cannot wait, Chen replied firmly. He looked around the room, his eyes settling on the investors. I apologize for interrupting, but as the cybersecurity insurance provider for TechDynamics, we have an obligation to disclose certain information that may impact your investment decision. Richard Maxwell leaned forward suddenly, very interested. Please continue, Mr. Chen. What information is that? Chen opened his laptop. Our forensic team has confirmed that TechDynamics is currently experiencing an active security breach. Unauthorized access to protected health information was detected approximately 72 hours ago and continues at this moment. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Jeremy's face drained of color. Robert looked like he had been slapped. Furthermore, Chen continued when the noise subsided. Our investigation has revealed numerous violations of the security requirements specified in TechDynamics insurance policy, including disabled authentication controls, improper access, management, and failure to maintain secure VPN protocols. He paused, looking directly at Robert. As a result, I am here to formally notify you that your $199 million insurance policy has been voided effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Richard Maxwell slowly unmuted his microphone, his voice frighteningly calm. Who just lit my money on fire? All eyes turned to Robert, who seemed unable to speak. Jeremy jumped in, his voice higher than normal. There must be some mistake. We have maintained all required security protocols. We have extensive documentation proving otherwise, Chen replied unruffled, including system logs showing unauthorized modifications to security controls and evidence that executives were informed of the breach, but chose not to disclose it. Miss Lowell, the compliance specialist from Maxwell Investments, closed her laptop with a snap. Mr. Phillips, were you aware of this security breach prior to this meeting? Robert hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. We were investigating some security anomalies, yes. And you did not think this was relevant information for potential investors, she pressed. We wanted to complete our investigation before raising alarms, Robert replied weakly. Richard Maxwell stood up. This meeting is over. Maxwell Investments will not be proceeding with the investment at this time. We will also be reviewing our legal options regarding the non-disclosure of material information during investment discussions. Jeremy panicked. Wait, this is all a misunderstanding. The security issues are minor, and that breach report is probably exaggerated. In fact, he turned to point at me. Our security lead has been creating problems because she is upset about some procedural changes we implemented. All eyes turned to me. I had been silent throughout the exchange, but now found myself in the spotlight. Richard Maxwell addressed me directly. You are the security lead. Were you aware of this breach? I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, quite literally. Yes, sir. I discovered the breach 2 nights ago and immediately reported it to management with comprehensive documentation. I was instructed to keep it quiet until after this meeting. Jeremy's face contorted with rage. She is lying. She's been trying to sabotage the HealthFlow launch because we overruled some of her excessive security demands. I have all the documentation right here, I said calmly, opening my laptop, including system logs showing the breach emails warning management about security vulnerabilities and records of security protocols being disabled despite my objections. I connected my laptop to the presentation system and displayed a timeline of events complete with screenshots of logs, emails, and Jeremy's explicit instructions to kill her VPN. As you can see, I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. I repeatedly warned about the security risks being introduced. The breach occurred exactly as I predicted through the vulnerabilities created when security protocols were bypassed. Martin Chen from CyberShield was reviewing my documentation with interest. This matches our findings exactly. Miss Howard, would you be willing to share this documentation with our investigation team? Of course, I replied. I have been documenting everything according to incident response protocols. Richard Maxwell was looking at my timeline with a mixture of anger and professional interest. So you raised these concerns repeatedly and they were ignored. Worse than ignored, I clarified. I was specifically ordered to disable security measures and then to conceal the resulting breach. Robert finally found his voice. That is not accurate. We were simply prioritizing development speed for the investor demonstration. By creating the exact security vulnerabilities that led to this breach, I pointed out, and then hiding the breach from both your insurance provider and your investors. The board members who were present looked shell-shocked. One of them, Barbara Winters, spoke up. I think we need to call an emergency board meeting. Now. Jeremy was still trying to salvage the situation. This is all being blown out of proportion. The breach is probably just some routine scanning that triggered oversensitive alerts. Martin Chen shook his head. Our forensic team has confirmed data exfiltration of approximately 3 terabytes, including patient records, financial information, and source code. This is a major breach by any standard. Richard Maxwell gathered his papers. We will be watching how TechDynamics handles this situation very carefully. Your response will determine whether we reconsider our investment at a future date. He paused at the door. I suggest you start by listening to your security lead. She seems to be the only one here who understood the risks you were taking. As the investors filed out, Robert turned to Jeremy with fury in his eyes. For the first time, I saw the nephew shrink under his uncle's gaze. The board members were already on their phones, presumably calling in the rest of the board for the emergency meeting. Derek, the CFO, approached me quietly. Was that anonymous tip to CyberShield from you? I met his eyes but did not answer. He nodded slightly. Good. Someone had to do the right thing. Barbara Winters, the board member who had called for the emergency meeting, approached me next. Miss Howard, the board will want to hear your full account. Please prepare all your documentation and be ready to present in 30 minutes. As everyone dispersed in a state of shock and confusion, Sarah found me in the chaos. You did it, she whispered. You actually stood up to them. I felt oddly calm now that the truth was out, though I knew the hardest parts were still to come. I had no choice. They were going to destroy everything this company stands for. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said, gathering my materials for the board meeting, we see if this company can be saved. The emergency board meeting began in a state of barely controlled chaos. Board members who had not been present for the investor debacle were still trying to understand what had happened, while those who had witnessed it firsthand were visibly shaken. Robert and Jeremy sat apart from each other, neither making eye contact with anyone. Barbara Winters, who had emerged as the board's impromptu leader in the crisis, called the meeting to order. Before we hear from anyone else, I want Miss Howard to present her documentation so we all understand exactly what happened. For the next 45 minutes, I walked the board through the complete timeline. Jeremy's initial interference with security protocols, the gradual dismantling of our security infrastructure, my repeated warnings, the discovery of the breach management's decision to conceal it, and finally the disastrous investor meeting. I presented emails, system logs, meeting notes, and recorded conversations where legal in our state that created an incontrovertible record of what had occurred. The board listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the magnitude of the disaster. When I finished, Barbara thanked me and turned to Robert. Do you dispute any of this evidence? Robert, looking 20 years older than he had that morning, shook his head. The timeline is accurate. My only defense is that I trusted Jeremy's judgment on technical matters more than I should have. Jeremy immediately tried to deflect. Uncle Robert, this is ridiculous. She's manipulating those logs and emails to make herself look like a hero while blaming us for normal business decisions. Every company makes security trade-offs for efficiency. Derek, who had been reviewing my financial impact assessment, spoke up. These were not normal business decisions, Jeremy. You deliberately circumvented security protocols that were explicitly required by our insurance policy. As a result, we now have zero coverage for a major data breach. He turned to the board with grim expression. The financial implications are severe. Preliminary estimates suggest potential liabilities exceeding $250 million from regulatory fines, lawsuits, and remediation costs. Without insurance coverage, this could bankrupt the company. The color drained from every face in the room. One board member, a venture capitalist named Thomas Wu, leaned forward. What are our options for reinstating the insurance? Martin Chen from CyberShield, who had been invited to join the meeting, shook his head. The policy cannot be reinstated. The violations were too severe and deliberate. Your only option would be to apply for a new policy after fully resolving the breach and implementing proper security controls, but premiums would be significantly higher if you could get coverage at all. And what about the breach itself? Barbara asked. How bad is it, and can it be contained? I took a deep breath. The breach is ongoing. The attackers still have access to our systems through the backdoors they established. We need to immediately isolate affected systems, revoke compromised credentials, and close the security holes that allowed the intrusion. How long will that take? Thomas asked. With a fully staffed incident response team working around the clock, at least a week for containment. Full remediation and security rebuilding would take months. We do not have months, Robert interjected. The HealthFlow launch is scheduled in 6 weeks. HealthFlow cannot launch in its current state, I stated firmly. The codebase has been compromised. We would need to review every line of code for implanted backdoors or vulnerabilities. Jeremy slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. We cannot just halt development because of some theoretical security concerns. These are not theoretical, Martin Chen replied coldly. Our forensic team has confirmed that the attackers downloaded the entire HealthFlow source code. They have everything they need to identify and exploit any vulnerability. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Years of work and millions of dollars potentially rendered worthless overnight. Barbara Winters turned to me. Miss Howard, if you were given complete authority over security, could you resolve this situation? Before I could answer, Jeremy interrupted. You cannot be serious. She is the one who let this breach happen in the first place. No, Jeremy, Barbara replied sharply. Based on the evidence, you are the one who created the conditions for this breach by explicitly overriding security protocols against expert advice. Miss Howard appears to be the only person who actually tried to prevent it. She turned back to me. What would you need to address this crisis properly? I had been thinking about this question since the moment the breach was discovered. Complete authority over security protocols and infrastructure. A dedicated budget for incident response. No interference from management in technical security decisions. And most importantly, a clear message from the board that security is non-negotiable, even if it delays product launches. Thomas Wu nodded. Reasonable requests given the circumstances. Robert looked defeated. What about HealthFlow? We have invested everything in this product. HealthFlow can still be saved, I assured him. But we need to prioritize security now, or there will not be a product to launch regardless of the schedule. Barbara called for a vote. All in favor of granting Miss Howard emergency authority over security operations with the requested resources and autonomy. Every hand went up except for Robert's and Jeremy's. The motion passes, Barbara declared. Now, as for leadership changes. Jeremy stood up, his face red. This is a witch hunt. You cannot blame me for making business decisions that every executive makes. Not every executive ignores explicit security warnings and then conceals a data breach from investors, Thomas replied coldly. The evidence suggests gross negligence at best and potentially fraudulent behavior at worst. Jeremy turned to Robert. Uncle Robert, are you going to let them do this to me? After everything I have done for this company. But Robert would not meet his nephew's eyes. He seemed to have aged a decade in a single day, the weight of his decisions finally catching up to him. Barbara continued firmly. Jeremy Phillips is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort him from the building, and his system access will be revoked before he leaves this room. Jeremy sputtered in disbelief as a security guard appeared at the door. You cannot do this. I built HealthFlow. This company needs me. What this company needs, Barbara replied, is integrity and competent leadership, neither of which you have demonstrated. As Jeremy was escorted out, still protesting, Barbara turned to Robert. As for the CEO position, Robert raised a hand. There is no need to vote. I tender my resignation effective immediately. My poor judgment in this matter has caused incalculable harm to the company I founded. I cannot in good conscience continue to lead. The board accepted his resignation with visible relief. Barbara was appointed interim CEO with a mandate to guide the company through the crisis. After the meeting, Amanda approached me in the hallway. "Maxine, I owe you an apology. I should have backed you up more strongly when you raised these concerns." "You tried," I acknowledged. Jeremy had created an environment where anyone who spoke up was at risk. "Still, I should have done more," she insisted. "If there is anything I can do to help now." "There is," I assured her. "I will need every capable person to help with the remediation efforts. This is going to be a team effort." The next few days were a blur of activity. I assembled an incident response team, bringing in external security experts to supplement our internal resources. We worked around the clock to identify compromised systems, close security holes, and eject the attackers from our network. The media caught wind of the story, of course. "TechDynamics suffers major data breach, CEO resigns," read the headlines. Our stock price plummeted and clients began calling with concerns about their data. Barbara held a press conference, taking the unusual step of being completely transparent about what had happened. "We experienced a significant security incident resulting from improper management decisions," she admitted. "The responsible executives have been removed, and we have empowered our security team led by Maxine Howard to implement all necessary measures to resolve the situation." It was a risky strategy, but it began to work. By acknowledging the failure and demonstrating a clear plan to address it, TechDynamics slowly began to rebuild trust. 1 week after the breach discovery, I received a surprising email from Richard Maxwell requesting a meeting. When we spoke, his question caught me off guard. "If Maxwell Investments were to provide emergency funding for your security remediation efforts, what would you do differently?" "Sir," I asked, confused. "I was impressed by your integrity, Miss Howard," he explained. "You stood up for what was right despite enormous pressure. That is the kind of leadership we look for in our portfolio companies." "The company made serious mistakes," I acknowledged. "Companies are just collections of people," Maxwell replied. "The people who made those mistakes are gone. The question is whether the people who remain, yourself included, can build something better from the ruins." That conversation marked the beginning of TechDynamics' slow journey back from the brink. Maxwell Investments did not provide the full $199 million they had originally planned, but they did offer enough emergency funding to support our security rebuilding efforts with the possibility of additional planes investment if certain milestones were met. As I left the office that night, exhausted but hopeful for the first time in weeks, I found Sarah waiting for me. "You did it," she said simply. "You saved the company." "We are not saved yet," I cautioned. "We have months of work ahead of us." "But we have a chance now," she pointed out. "A week ago, I thought TechDynamics was finished." I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. "A chance is all we need." 6 months after what became known internally as the VPN incident, TechDynamics was a fundamentally different company. The sleek hallways looked the same and many familiar faces remained, but the culture had undergone a profound transformation. As the new Chief Information Security Officer, I led a team that had tripled in size. Security was no longer viewed as a necessary evil or a cost center, but as a fundamental business function essential to our survival and success. When I walked into meetings now, people listened. Barbara Winters had moved from interim to permanent CEO, bringing a refreshing transparency to the role. In one of her first acts, she had established a security-first policy that made security sign-off mandatory for all technical decisions. HealthFlow had finally launched 4 months later than originally planned. The delay had allowed us to completely rebuild its security architecture and conduct extensive penetration testing. When it finally reached the market, it was not just innovative but also one of the most secure platforms in the healthcare industry. The breach had been costly. The final tally of regulatory fines, legal settlements, and remediation expenses had exceeded $300 million. Without insurance coverage, TechDynamics had been forced to raise additional capital at unfavorable terms, significantly diluting existing shareholders. But we had survived, which many industry observers had considered impossible in those first chaotic weeks. More than survived, we had begun to thrive again, with HealthFlow gradually gaining market share and rebuilding client trust. On a personal level, the journey had been both challenging and rewarding. The weeks following the breach had been the most stressful of my career, with 18-hour workdays and the weight of the company's survival partially on my shoulders. I had suffered anxiety attacks and insomnia, questioning my decisions even as I made them. But I had also found unexpected strength and support. Sarah had stood beside me throughout the crisis, offering both technical expertise and emotional support when I needed it most. Amanda had become a valuable ally, using her institutional knowledge to help navigate the company's complex systems. Even Derek, once so reluctant to invest in security, had become one of my strongest advocates in budget discussions. My relationship with the technical teams had evolved as well. Initially, some had resented the stricter security protocols I implemented, viewing them as obstacles to their work. But as we collaborated to rebuild our systems securely, mutual respect had grown. Now developers often sought security input early in their process, recognizing that building security in from the start was easier than adding it later. The industry had taken notice of our transformation. I had been invited to speak at several cybersecurity conferences, sharing the lessons learned from our experience. Without naming names or sharing confidential details, I used our story to illustrate the dangers of prioritizing speed over security and the importance of empowering security teams. One rainy Tuesday, I found an unexpected visitor waiting outside my office. Richard Maxwell, the investor whose questions had helped expose the truth during that fateful meeting, had stopped by during a visit to our headquarters. "I wanted to see how our investment is doing," he explained with a smile. "Both the financial one and the one we made in you." I showed him our security operations center, where analysts monitored network traffic and system logs for signs of suspicious activity. I explained the new security architecture we had implemented, the training programs we had established for all employees, and the governance structures that ensured security considerations were built into every business decision. "Impressive," he commented as we returned to my office. "You have built something substantial from the ruins." "We had a lot of help," I acknowledged, "including yours." "Our emergency funding was just capital," he replied. "What you did with it, the culture change, the technical improvements, that was all you and your team." As he prepared to leave, he asked one final question. "Do you ever hear from Robert or Jeremy?" I shook my head. Robert retired completely from the industry. I heard he bought a small farm somewhere in Montana. As for Jeremy, I hesitated. Last I heard, he was having trouble finding another executive position. The industry is small, and word gets around. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. Actions have consequences. That is a lesson many in business would do well to remember. He extended his hand. "Keep up the good work, Miss Howard. Companies like TechDynamics need leaders like you." After he left, I sat at my desk, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The crisis had been painful and could have been avoided if leadership had listened to security concerns from the beginning. But from that crisis had emerged a stronger, more resilient company with a healthier culture and more sustainable business practices. I had learned valuable lessons about standing firm on matters of principle even when it seemed like the entire organization was against me. I had discovered the importance of documentation and clear communication when raising concerns. Most importantly, I had learned that true leadership sometimes means being willing to risk everything for what is right. These were lessons I now shared with the junior members of my team, especially those who sometimes felt discouraged when their security recommendations met resistance. "Your job is not to be popular," I would tell them. "Your job is to protect this company and its customers even when that is difficult." As I gathered my things to head home that evening, Sarah popped her head into my office. "Some of us are going for drinks to celebrate closing the last of the post-breach audit findings. Want to join?" I smiled. "Absolutely. This milestone definitely deserves a celebration." As we walked out together, I thought about how differently things might have turned out if I had simply given in to the pressure and compromised my professional standards. The easier path would have been to disable the security measures, as ordered, to keep quiet about the breach, to prioritize my job security over doing what was right. But that path would have led to disaster, not just for the company, but for my own integrity and professional identity. Some compromises were simply too costly, regardless of the short-term consequences of standing firm. In the end, the lesson was clear in cybersecurity, and in life, integrity is non-negotiable. Technical skills can be learned, processes can be improved, but once you compromise your core principles, recovering that lost ground is nearly impossible. Have you ever had to stand up for what is right at work, even when it was difficult? Share your story in the comments below. And if this account of corporate accountability and professional integrity resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might be facing similar ethical challenges in their careers. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most important growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to protect what matters in your own professional journey.